This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi Glatstein. Bruchim Habayim to the Gold of MMH. We already spent 2 weeks on this topic of what we call Yom Haatzmaut, regarding whether it's permitted to say Hallel, whether you're required to say Hallel, whether you're allowed to say Hallel, whether it's prohibited to say Hallel, and so forth. And just to review some of the arguments that we've given so far. Again, I don't want to be accused of not being balanced in my approach here, so I just want to begin by saying that what we're doing is we're trying to present what we consider the views of the main poskim of the last century. If anybody could bring in other information from other poskim, I'd be very happy to see. But we brought in the views basically of the Tzitz Eliezer, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, the Chida, and so far we saw 3 arguments why perhaps it would not be permitted to say Hallel on Yom Haatzmaut. The first one is based on the letter of the Chazon Ish, and based on the opinion of the Tzitz Eliezer and Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, that in today's day and age we're no longer authorized to make enactments, make gezeros, make takanos, make additions to tefillah and so forth. And this is something that now in our day and age it's beyond us. We're not on that level. To make a new decree, to make a new enactment would be as if to say, we are worthy to do such a thing, but in reality we are unworthy to do such a thing. To tamper with the Jewish calendar or the Jewish ceremonies and so forth would be considered in a certain arrogance that we're worthy to tamper. Okay, that was the first argument we gave. The second argument we gave was based on the Chida. I just want to say the Chida's tshuva is probably the authoritative tshuva on the topic of Hallel for a miracle, and the Chida says that one can only say Hallel for a miracle that happens for the entire Jewish people, not for a segment of the Jewish people. Okay, that was the opinion of the Chida, based on which many poskim say that as great and as miraculous as 4867 was, it was not to the entirety of the Jewish people. Any questions on that will be for last time. So we explained that Achashverosh ruled over Me'ah ve'esrim Sheva Medina. Klal Yisrael, right? He was Malach B'Kippah, and that's something we addressed last week.
But we got the land of Israel, so it belongs to everybody.
That's wonderful, but Hallel has a specific halacha. Sorry, there are no more. Hallel has a specific halacha that has to be to all of Klal Yisrael. A third argument was the argument of the Maratz Chios, and that is that one is only authorized to say Hallel for an open miracle. An open miracle. Now, even in times of Chanukah, the Gemara asks, why do we say Hallel on Chanukah? And the Gemara does not answer because of the military victory. Why not? It was miraculous. The answer is, it was not an open miracle. It was miraculous under the guise of nature. And therefore, you're not authorized to say Hallel for a miracle under the guise of nature. And that is why the Gemara says, you know why you say Hallel on Chanukah? For the miracle of the oil. Okay? And based on that, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef and the Tzitz Eliezer say that as great, as miraculous as 48 and 67 were, nevertheless, they were not open miracles. The laws of nature were not changed openly. And for these 3 reasons, so far we saw, perhaps one should not say Hallel on Yom Haatzmaut. Now we're going to get involved in something maybe even more sensitive. And that is some of the hashkafic aspects of it. And with that, we're going to start on page 6. And this is the second column, number Hey, Ois Hey. This comes from the Sefer Masa Oivadia of Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. Okay. And he begins like this. We're probably familiar that people have coined a phrase, and they haven't invented the phrase. It's a phrase that has already been coined, and they apply it to the independence of Israel, and that is Aschalta de Geulta, the beginning of the Geula. Can we say that Israeli independence is the beginning of the Jewish redemption? So we cited last week that there is a very interesting sefer called Hatikufa Hagadola, written by Rav Menachem Kasher, who was the student of the Rogatchover Gaon. And in this sefer, Rav Menachem Kasher records the signatures of about 100 or 200 Gedolei Yisrael who lived in the time, who all sign a letter that state that the establishment of the state of Israel was considered Aschalta de Geulta, the beginning of the Geula. Now, just off the bat...
Did you say Menachem Kasher?
Yes.
Oh.
Just off the bat...
He's going to knock him down.
No. Just off the bat, Rabbi Isai, the term Aschalta de Geulta doesn't really mean too much. Why not? Because the Vilna Gaon said that the year 1800 was the Aschalta de Golta. And Reb Yisrael Kutner said the year 1899 was Aschalta de Golta. And Rav Shem Mishmol said when the Balfour Declaration was signed, that was Aschalta de Golta. And the term Aschalta de Golta has been applied to any Jewish salvation in the last 200 years. Wow. So what does that mean? Aschalta de Golta just means a good thing. That's all it means. Does it mean the beginning of the final redemption? It's hard to make the case that it's really the beginning. And even in its specific term, it's not a specific terminology. But nevertheless, who signed on this letter that 1940 was the beginning of the Gula? You have Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, certainly one of the Gedolei Yisrael. You have Rabbi Chil Michal Tikachinsky. You have Rabbi Chil Michal Tikachinsky, who was the author of the Gesher HaChaim, was the author of Sefer Eretz Yisrael, one of the Gedolei Yisrael. You have even, so to speak, from the Olam HaYeshivas, the Rosh Yeshiva of Chevron, Rabbi Cheskel Sarna. You have someone by the name of Harav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. And you have about another 150 other Gedolei Yisrael. Just to point out, conspicuously absent are probably what the world considered the two greatest Gedolei Yisrael. Chazon Ish and the Brisker Rav. They did not agree that this was Aschalta de Golta. Well, even though Aschalta de Golta doesn't really mean too much, they nevertheless did not put their names on this. Okay, so we're going to see Rabbi Ovadia Yosef writes that in the Sefer Hatzkufa Gedola, he says, Kemat, all the Gedolei Yisrael signed on it, but I'm just pointing out for the sake of intellectual honesty, the two Gedolei Hadar did not sign on it. Whatever camp you come from, whether you come from this camp or that, either it's the Chazon Ish or the Brisker Rav. Hard to make a case for, I know Moshe Feinstein wasn't in Eretz Yisrael. No. Right?
We're talking about Gedolei and Eretz Yisrael.
Or have agreed to express their opinion on the matter. Okay. That may be, I'm not sure. Anyway, so let's see what Rav Ovadia Yosef writes. Look in Oisem. Movad calls it. Besides all this, Yishloimar, Ki Heinamnam Rabim V'Atzumim Migdolei Yisrael, Royim V'Hakamas Hamdina Aschalta Gula. Many Gedolei Yisrael see the establishment of the state as the beginning of the Gula. And he quotes a few lines down, V'Hagon Rav Menachem Kasher, B'Sifrei HaTkufa G'dola. But how do I have the Sefer HaTkufa G'dola? My great-grandfather moved to Eretz Yisrael in the 70s, and he bought this for my father to convince him to say Hallel on Yom Haatzmaut. And my father recently said, "You want this Sefer?" I said, "You bet." Okay, so that's Rav Menachem Kasher says like this: Hevi Cruz b'shem Das Torah. He brings like a kol koireh. You could see over here. Das Torah. He quotes over here in the Sefer Das Torah. Shechayis min alav kemat kol gedolei hadar. Kemat. Almost all the gedolei hadar signed on it. The koirim es hakamas medina Yisrael b'shem aschalta de Golta. Nevertheless, says Rabbi Ovadia, when the Jews left Mitzrayim, was that the beginning of the Gula? Certainly. They were only missing crossing the sea. And yet, they didn't say Hallel when they left Mitzrayim. They waited until they split the sea. Why? Because leaving Mitzrayim is not good enough. You don't say Hallel till, it's not over. It ain't over till it's over. That was, okay, good point. The Yerushalmi says they said Hallel because it was Yom Tif. But to say Hallel for the miracle, they did not say, the Yerushalmi says, until they left. That's what Yerushalmi says. Take a look. He says, Mikol Makon. Since we have a long road ahead, to reach the ultimate rest, whether it's in terms of a national scale, a military scale, whether it's on a spiritual level, we can't obligate someone to say Hallel. He cites Yerushalmi that says that we didn't say Hallel until the sea split. And then he says something very interesting. V'afkan, here too in Israel, Manhige Tzvos Arav, the generals of the Arab armies, Lamros Hisbosos, V'hamapalos Shenachlu, despite all of their setbacks and all of their failures, They're still waving the sword at us to attack us and to destroy us again. Right? Did the Arabs say, okay, war is over, we retreat? No. Their guns are still pointed at us. So, yeah, we won. But if the opposing enemy is still in attack mode, you're going to say Hallel for the victory? And says Rabbi Yosef, there are many cursed nations that we thought were our friends, but when it came to all the different wars, they turned their backs on us. Whether it's Milchemes HaKoimimios, whether it's the War of Independence, Mivtza HaKedesh, what's that? 56. Milchemes Sheshesayam 67. Right? Milchama HaHatasha. What's that? Milchama HaHatasha?
That's the 73 war.
What?
73.
Says Rabbi, yeah, lo shalafti, lo shakadati, lo nachti, roiges. To say Hallel for 48, when since then we've experienced so many wars, you can't say we've reached any type of ultimate peace. And then he says, "V'idenu techlenu einenu yishuas Yisrael amitis." We're still awaiting the final salvation. And then he says something very frightening. Umebechina ruchanis, on a spiritual level. Asher yarod yaradnu elef malas achronas. We have went 1,000 steps backwards. Ve'edimanu, we are witnesses. Lihisdardarus musaras matima, to a terrible downfall in the Jewish people. Hamatiranos goiveres, the leniencies, the freedom, the hasparkos mishtalelas brosh kalchutzes. You see tremendous lack of observance everywhere you go.
He doesn't mention intermarriage.
Choser tznios.
Oh, he does?
No, lack of modesty. Big day pritzos.
Intermarriage is terrible.
Big day pritzos. Sifrei pornographia. Visrate konam avishim. Basically, every ill of the Western world has been imported, and unfortunately now it's become the other way around, where the ills of the Western world are being exported from Israel. And that's a fact, unfortunately. That the country, you don't want to speak bad, but the country that exports the most promiscuity of any country in the world is the modern day state. It's a fact. Chilu Shabbos b'farhesya. Psichas etalizi treifa b'mamadim afilim. My modern Hebrew isn't good, but I think that means...
Meat
shops.
What?
Muchos.
Meat shops.
Treif restaurants, right?
No.
Yeah. Void kahina v'chahila. V'alakol shemeos alfa yisrael mischanchim b'mostos chinuch lo datiyim. You have hundreds and thousands of Yidden. They go to schools that are not religious.
It's quite interesting. Nowadays, there are more students who learn in the yeshiva than ever before.
That's true.
Correct.
When he doesn't look at the positive side, he looks only at the negative.
So in the next paragraph, he points out on a good point. On the other side, if you turn over your sheet, Rabbi Isai, if you turn over the sheet, on the 5th line, he says, "V'lo akached," we can't deny, "Ki be'emes kol hatzlalim," with all the casualties, yeshnam oros gedolim. There's great light. She'en lanu salameh, we can't ignore. Ki medina Yisrael kayam hi merkaz haTorah ba'olam kuloi. Israel today is the world center of Torah. You have tens of thousands of yeshiva are learning Torah day and night. And the Torah has been restored to a level that we never had. So on the one hand, we have tragedy that we've never seen before in terms of the lack of observance and the hatred toward observance and the hatred towards Sinas HaMitzvah. And you have types of chatoim and avonos that we've never seen before on the one hand, and on the other hand you have great light. So you're going to say Hallel when half of our people, or the majority of our people, are drowning, are being destroyed? Maybe yes, maybe no. It's a very difficult thing to say definitively.
It's the good news and the bad news, right?
What?
That's the time.
Right.
One more they would have been gone. So
Yeah.
they still say it.
No, there they said Tamah because God took every single Jew and He put him on the track of Sfiras HaOmer for Kabbalas HaTorah. Halavai, if we took every Israeli who went to a secular school and we put them into religious schools, and right now they don't know anything, maybe then we would say Hallel. But right now, Lev La'achim is only touching a very, very small percentage of the secular Israelis. The vast majority of the Israelis in public school, unfortunately, they're not headed to a good future.
Now it's the biggest chosr b'tshuva that ever was.
The greatest chosr b'tshuva that ever was. You know what percent of the Jewish people it is?
Whatever it is, it's the biggest one.
So you're going to say Hallel when 99% of our people are disappearing and 1% is being saved?
Oh, God forbid.
What?
The numbers are wrong. It's not 99%.
Well, the vast majority of the secular Jews are not being saved. They're not being saved.
70 to 80%, but no more.
That's a very large percent. That's Ruba Kakulai.
80% it's a large number.
Four Israeli Jews, Rabbi, who are not religious, Rabbi.
So for that large number, you cannot say Hallel.
Rabbi,
Okay, Rabbi Sai, the point that he's making is that to sing the same way when we left Egypt, and the Egyptians were drowning, Hashem said to the Malachim, you can't say Hallel.
That's right.
And when your own brothers and sisters are drowning, how are you going to say Hallel? That's a very strong argument. That's a very strong argument. Okay.
Do you think during the Makkahs, for each Makkah, that was a nest, right?
Yeah. Did they say Hallel? Of course not.
Would it have been appropriate to have said Hallel?
No.
Because they were still slaves.
Because we're still being, as soon as the Makkah is over,
No, still wasn't in
still
Egypt.
there. Okay.
things didn't change.
So Rabbi Sai, these are some thoughts to think about. Again, what you do, what you choose to do, you'll follow your own competent halachic authorities. We're just presenting what I consider the views of the Gedolei HaPoskim. Okay, let us take a look at something a little bit more to the right, so to speak, and that is the opinion of Rabbi Reuven Gurzovsky, in not a halachic work, in his a sefer called Boyos Hazman, the challenges of the time. And he writes, in general, aside from Hallel, Independence Day, is it a day that we celebrate? Okay. And from this point in the Shiur and on, don't argue with me, you'll argue with the sources that we're presenting. Okay?
What number?
We're at number 26.
26?
26. So far we've seen that, as Reb Menachem Kasher quoted, hundreds of Gedolei Yisrael consider the establishment of the state Aschalta de Golta. Now we're going to bring the opinions of those who do not consider it Aschalta de Golta. As we explained, whatever it even means to be Aschalta de Golta. Even if it doesn't mean something specific, even if it's only a generic term, there were Gedolei Yisrael that did not consider the establishment of the state, even the beginning of the Gula. And that is Rabbi Reuven Gurzovsky, and this is very much the opinion of the Olam HaYeshivos. And look at number 26. He brings down, he says, Kol sheken on the second line, Lasas chag b'yom ha'atzmaut. Certainly, to make a Yom Tif out of the day, we should not do. Yeah? We're not required to believe this is the beginning of the redemption. Acharei shelafi kabbalas ha'avos hapshuta. The simple tradition of the Jewish people is Yeh kibbutz golios aidei Mashiach tzidkenu. The Jews are going to be ingathered not by a military victory, but through Mashiach. That's what the Rambam says openly. Mashiach. There will be a human being who is alive and did not die, who will be the Redeemer of the Jewish people, and he is the one who is going to bring back the Golios. That's the opinion of the Rambam. That's the opinion of the Rambam.
Life.
Now, Mashiach did not come yet. Mashiach didn't come in 48. Many Jews came to Israel. The answer is, according to Rabbi Reuven Gurzovsky, we don't consider that kibbutz golios. That may be considered a great historic, epic period of history, but we don't consider that kibbutz golios. After all, we find in the Navi, and the Chassam Sofer points this out, that Rachel was promised v'shavu banim l'gvulam. Chassam Sofer says that means before Mashiach comes. So there will be Jews returning to the land of Israel before Mashiach. But to be considered 48, the beginning of the Geula, it's not the beginning of the Geula. Our tradition is Mashiach will bring in the Golios. Says Rabbi Reuven Gurzovsky, this is the majority view when it comes to Kibbutz Golios. In other words, the opinion of the Rambam, the opinion of most Rishonim, is that Kibbutz Golios will be achieved by Mashiach Tzidkenu.
You don't see reality. There are more Jews in Israel than anywhere in the world.
But are the majority of the Jewish people living in Israel?
Outside of Israel.
In Israel.
Pretty soon it will be. Pretty soon it
No,
will
it
be.
is.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm not arguing, but we want to know on a halachic level. Have we reached what we call kibbutz galios? The answer is no. How do I know that? Because Mashiach will do that. What?
Do we know who the Mashiach is?
No. But
Which means anyone can be the Mashiach.
yeah,
Which
correct.
means it can be. I don't
But the
think
Rambam
anyone-
says when he is Mashiach, we'll know about
So
it.
maybe the one who was, and
No.
we don't know, we didn't recognize him.
What?
How you don't know?
The Romans killed him 2,000 years ago. That he's not Mashiach. Right? But once somebody, once Mashiach is not here yet.
He died without accomplishing the mission.
We'll know when Mashiach comes. So the halachic definition of kibbutz galios has not been achieved for one simple reason. Why? Because it will be achieved, as the Rambam says, through Mashiach. Okay, let us move on. How about rejoicing, being happy? He writes, look at number 27, third paragraph. Gab etzem hasimcha. Regarding being happy in general, third paragraph. Hine gam kishemes aviv, Rachmana litzlan, afa pi shenafla Yerusha. Let's say a person's father passes away, Rachmana litzlan, and a big inheritance falls to him. So what does he do? He rejoices or he mourns? He mourns. Tzarich lesaba. Let's say you find $1 million thing, $1 million gem, but you may get caught by the government and they may incarcerate you. So what do? You're not going to be happy. Because what we call yatsa schara behefsedai. Says Reb Ruvain, if you find that we've established a country, but thousands of Jews have been led astray by the founders of the country, whether it's they've been removed from their roots, or they've been taken away from their heritage to grow up secular. We're not talking about just, Reb Ruvain says, if you want to be secular, you can be secular. We're talking about the founders of the state actively removing Jews from Torah and mitzvahs, which is a fact.
The kids from Tehran. They changed them.
Then you're going to say Hala, you're going to sing, you're going to rejoice. Yatsa schara behefseda, you can make the case.
Like Lapid.
Again, there are good qualities, there are redeeming qualities, but we can't ignore the failures. And now I want to get into something very interesting. Okay, and this, again, I'm not saying my own opinion. In general, okay, this is a very interesting question. We said that the miracles that happened in 48, yes, they were miraculous, but they were in the guise of nature. They were b'derech hateva. Now what we want to take it further. Were they miraculous? Or maybe they weren't even miraculous at all. How could you say they weren't miraculous? For the following argument. And that is, Reb Ruvain says, look at the end of number 26, and that is, he quotes a tshuva of the Rivash. If you want to know if it's a miracle or not, you have to know who was instrumental in bringing it about. The Rivash writes, if the people who were instrumental in bringing it about were wicked people, then we can't consider it a miracle at all. And Reb Ruvain writes, look, V'ayin b'tshuvas Rivash, shakasav, she'ein hakadosh baruch hu oisa neis al yedei rishayim hamolim b'charim. God doesn't even perform miracles through wicked. So would we, according to Reb Ruvain, 48 wasn't miraculous?
No.
He would say it wasn't miraculous.
There was some tzaddikim there.
It certainly was fortuitous.
Wow.
Let's put it that way.
Were they fighting in the war?
They were learning.
That's what Reuven says. We're going to discuss this a little bit more at length.
Are you telling me there were items that happened in 48?
Okay, we're going to discuss that. I'm not arguing with you.
I'm not saying there were miracles, but you have to say that
It makes you scratch your head.
Hashem was there.
I use the word.
That's what you would think, and then I'm going to read to you
And
an eyewitness report. And you'll come to your own conclusions,
how many,
okay?
how many
That's right.
eyewitnesses?
Let me, I have a lot of information to present. Again, I'm not presenting my own opinion. I want to you to have a more wider
One-sided.
appreciation. Okay.
What is that?
One minute. Okay, let's continue. What about, but isn't Yom Ha'atzmaut a good custom? Isn't it a minhag tov? Says Reb Ruvain, even if I want to grant you that it's a minhag tov, but there's another concept. That if wicked people adopt a good custom, then the righteous have to abandon that custom. But what do you mean? It's a good custom. It's a wonderful custom. After all, they're showing gratitude to God. Even if it's a good custom and they're doing it for a good purpose, says Rabbi Glatstein, it doesn't matter. Once they adopt the custom, all the good people need to abandon the custom. And that's a halacha. This is not a matter of us. It's a halacha. He says, V'gam, Chag Haatzmaut hi minhag toif, hine mikivan shenhigu oisei rishayim, ein ligad l'noig ba. You should not practice it. Like it says in the Gilyon Marsha, says Reb Ruvain, but we're going to take it further. Because it's not even a good custom. Because if you ask the secular Israeli, why are you celebrating Yom Haatzmaut? Would he say we're showing gratitude to God?
No.
Or it's a demonstration of the might and power of the Israeli army? Maybe yes, maybe no. Depends who you ask. Certainly if you ask the founding fathers, they would say it's a demonstration and a declaration of the power of the Israeli army. If you ask those who instituted it, they would say it's to show our might to the rest of the world. If that's the case, says Rabbi Glatstein, then every other observant Jew needs to immediately abandon the practice.
Anybody ask them?
Abandon which?
What?
Anybody ask the founders? Because you are saying if somebody would have asked them, did anybody ask them? And they
I know. I have a good friend who's about tshuva, and he's become very learned. He fought in the army, and I asked him, well, do you say Hallel? He says, look, I do what I did in my previous life. When I fought for the country, I never even knew what Hallel was. And I continue to maintain that minhag that I...
Ask him if Ben Gurion say Hallel.
Look, okay.
Rabbi
Say, no, I don't... let's continue. Rabbi Say, now, on this next point, okay, this is for your benefit, We want to give another dimension of the attitude of other Gedolei Yisrael, and this is going to be the opinion of the Satmar Rebbe.
This is very difficult. This is a big...
Satmar Rebbe, one second. Satmar Rebbe says even further. Satmar Rebbe takes it even further. And then he says, until now we've at least acknowledged that it's a miraculous, but under the guise of nature. Satmar Rebbe says, he does not agree it was miraculous. I'll read to you what he says. I'm not even going to translate it. Okay? Because we're on... I'm not going to translate it.
Where is he?
It's worthwhile to see the words. And, no, it's in Hebrew. But, he says like this.
What number?
Number 27. Number 27. So again, Reb Ruvain said, for something to be miraculous, it has to take place through tzaddikim.
Wow.
Says the Satmar Rebbe, I'm sweating, you know. He says, Umikol shekain, on the third line, Benidon didan. In this situation, B'melchemes hatzionim im ha'arbiyim. Yeah? The war, the Zionists against the Arab. Lo haya afilu mamashos v'reach shel nes. Ki yadua, sheha'arbiyim v'yishmeelim ein aman shem chayil. V'niskayim behem abracha shekivel avim yishmael al pnei kol echav nafal.
It's the opinion of the Israelis.
Yeah, you hear this? The Yisrael Hema. What about Jews? Hema.
You translate the first part of the sentence.
I'll tell you after. The Yisrael Hema Gibayre Molchama. Okay. Umatzinu b'divrei Chazal. I have a reason why I don't want to translate this. Umatzinu b'divrei Chazal. She Yisrael b'teva azanheim. Kedisam sechas beya. Jews are powerful. A couple lines down. Nimsa. Dimein lahem Torah. Right? He quotes a Chazal that if a Jew would not have Torah, the Jew would destroy every nation in the world. So Satmar Rebbe says that's exactly what happened. These were Yisraelim she'ein lo Torah. Nimtza dimein lahem Torah vehema hepach Torah nisharim ba'azusan. A Jew who doesn't learn Torah will destroy any nation in the world. V'anu rayim zois b'chush. Because as chutzpahdik as every nation is, nothing competes to the secular Israeli. Shemachtzifim pneim ba'azus v'hachutzpah l'daber kashis av neged meluchais atzumais u'moishel madirim. You ever see a country speak that way against the superpowers of the world? Ve'im izgar v'mamachas v'ifenora v'Hashem yirachem. Now look what he writes. Ubarur shalo haya b'nitzachayin melchamasam shum neis ela hatzlacha melubash b'teva. Kasher hiidu harbe yodei davar v'sari meluchos b'mechtav ha'itim shumas ha'olam shehigidu meirosh shelo yenatzchu arvim b'mechama delav b'nei mechama neno.
Just now, the British advertised that they knew that the Jews were going to win.
Listen to what he says. He was in the state before the establishment. He says, "V'dachirna kanavina beretz Yisrael oid lefnei hakamas haMedina hisparu oz manhigei hatzionim she'enam yureim mimachama im ha'arabim af shehem rabim negdam." Why? Look at this. Ki teva ha'arabim levroyach v'lanos meicharav hamachama.
Which one is the Zionist leader who said it? Give me one name.
But what happened now? 1 minute, let me talk. Ulam, achshav oimrim ha'hepach. Ulam, achshav oimrim ha'hepach. Kedei lasamois hoinayim lahagdil netzchaynam v'niseyam ha'koizvos v'hamedumais. Basically, what happened? He says history has been rewritten. It's propaganda to make people think it was miraculous, when in fact, everybody predicted beforehand that was going to happen. Okay? And then in number 28, if you look further...
There's no name. No one.
He says further in number 28...
I don't think that the Arab of 1948 is the same Arab of 2013.
Good.
It's a very big difference.
That could be. We're not talking about the Arab of 2013. We're talking about the Matzav in 60 years ago. Right? So?
1948.
Rabbi say, you want to hear what he says? Okay. The Satmar Rebbe's opinion is even further. He says like this, Umuvan me'elav, self-understood. So if it's not miraculous, so then who did it? So I'll tell you. Umuvan me'elav she'en HaKadosh Baruch Hu make she'en ze me'HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Look at number 20. Ki me'yita yizbarach loy teitzei harois el yidei hasamach mem she'noisin loy kayach ze min hashamayim. It was in Yisayim. It wasn't coming from good sources. It was coming, according to Satmar Rebbe, from the Kayach HaTamah. And that is a well-known opinion of the Satmar Rebbe in his Sefer, Al Gold of MMH. He wrote an entire Sefer on this, Vayoel Moshe, that because he felt that miracles don't take place through Rishayim, he felt this was not a nes. It's something called...
How did he survive himself, not through the Rishayim?
They saved him. The Zionists saved him.
Yes,
of course.
The Zionists saved him. So how can you?
I'm not here to defend this opinion. I'm here to go through the various opinions. Okay? That is the opinion of Satmar Rebbe. That was the opinion of Rav Ruvain. Rav Ruvain held that since God does not perform miracles through Rishayim, we do not consider this a nes.
How come one of our greatest brachos came through Bilam?
Greatest brachos, but not greatest nisim.
Very good things happen.
Yeah. But in terms of miracles, we don't find that Bilam split the sea for us, or he brought Makas B'chayros, right? That's the opinion of Sam. What does Rav Moshe Feinstein say about this? Yeah? We want to know. How do we view it? If a miracle occurs through a Rasha, according to the view of Rav Moshe Feinstein, do we consider it a miracle, or do we say, no, God doesn't perform miracles through Rishayim? Says Rav Moshe, this is very important to know. Number 29, the Rav Moshe Feinstein in Igros Moshe Yardei Chelek Daled Siman Ches. A Jew was kidnapped, was held hostage in Uganda, right? Udvar Yehudi shenichtach b'Uganda. V'nitzel misham ha'idei hachayolim shabalasham. He was saved through soldiers. Is this a miracle? Or is this not a miracle? Do we say, well, look, open your eyes. The reality is, it looked pretty miraculous. Or do we say like the Satmar Rebbe? Do we say God does not perform miracles through Rishon? Says Rav Moshe, Mistaber sheyesh lahachshiv zeh l'neis galoi. It's logical to say, this is an open miracle. Take off your glasses, look at it honestly. Right? Could I do this? Could you do this? Would this naturally have happened? No. Ki b'derach hateva lo hayef shelios davar kazeh. Well, maybe it came about through the Kayach HaTumah. We don't say such a thing. Whatever occurs in this world is through God. God does not have the Kayach HaTumah perform miracles for the Jewish people so that they be led astray. God doesn't do that. Vein ha'tov uvein lahepach. V'hu ha'makeh v'hamarapeh. God is the one who wounds. God is the one who heals. It's not that Hashem sends the kach hatumah to wound and He heals. God does everything. V'hu asa shenishbu. God made them get captured. V'hu asa ha'atzala. He saved them. B'zeh shenasan oimetz v'ratzoin sheyechel lahatzal. By giving them the power to save. But why would God make a miracle through a Rasha? You know what? When you go up, Lachamei V'Esrim Shana, you'll ask Him that question. But it's none of our business who He uses as a tool to make a miracle. A miracle is a miracle. Be an honest person. Open up your eyes. You can't do this. This is supernatural. The fact that it's couched in Teva doesn't mean we minimize its value. Says Rav Moshe, Darkei Hashem Yisparach She'asa Hanes Aidei Poshim Nelmu Mimenu. We're not going to conclude God won't make a miracle through a Rasha, and therefore it must be like the Samar Rebbe says, Al Yidei, the Samach Mem, or the Kach HaTzum. No. God, why did He do this? We don't know why He did this. We can't explain the ways of God. Darkei Hashem are nistaros. They're hidden. They're secret. But how are we going to, let's try to figure out why God would do this. No, says Rav Moshe Feinstein, you're not even allowed to try to figure out why God would make a miracle through a Rasha. Who are you? We start Karichan Arayin in Hashem's Cheshbonos. This is all we do is we observe what we see. Why? When you go up, Lachamei V'Esrim Shana, Hashem will explain to you why He chose these people as His tool. Va'asar l'shum adam l'hischakim b'kushas Hashem. You're going to start asking Hashem, I don't understand. Why would God make a miracle through a Rasha? You know how to ask that question. Is it a miracle or is it not a miracle? Oh, it's only a miracle if a guy with a big tzaddik makes it. No. Hashem will choose who He wants to be the vehicles through which He conducts the miracle. Why He does that, we're not authorized to ask those questions. Says Rav Moshe Feinstein, Tamim tiyeh im Hashem. Be wholesome with God. Be wholesome with God means don't ask why. See the facts. There's a state. We have control of the Holy Land. We have control of our country. Is it supernatural? Well, it's not like Yitzias Mitzrayim, so maybe we won't say Hallel because it wasn't an open miracle. But to start to say it was through the Kayach HaTumah, right? Rav Moshe says no, we don't say that. We're not allowed to say that. We're not allowed to start asking questions why Hashem would choose a certain person or individual or group of people to conduct a miracle. Okay, Rabbi Say, let's conclude in the following way. By the way, you know the famous story with Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, right? So he pointed out to about the Chalutzim, right? The original settlers of the land. You know, it only says Nachnu 2 times in the whole Chumash. It says Nachnu Navar Chalutzim and Nachnu Pashanu Marinu. That Baal Turim points this out. So Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld said, "Oh, you see, the Chalutzim were Pashanu Marinu." It's a famous comment of Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. Right, the 2 times it says Nachnu Navar Chalutzim, and Nachnu Navar Pashinu. So when Rav Kook heard this, he said, "Surely, you know, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, you forgot about one of the Nachnus. There's a 3rd one. Nachnu Kulanu B'nei Ish, right? Kulanu B'nei Ish Nachnu. We're all the sons of one father. So even though they're Chalutzim, and even though Pashanu Marinu, but bottom line is Kulam b'nei ish echad nachnu. Right? That was the famous debate between. There's another very interesting story. You know, Rav Kook was very supportive of many Gedolei Yisrael coming from Europe to Eretz Yisrael. So when the tzaddik, Rav Itzla Petterberg, came to Eretz Yisrael, so Rav Kook went to the port to greet him, and he invited Rav Itzla to give an address to the assembled gathering. Rav Itzla says, it's not my style to be a public speaker like this. He was mechabed Rav Kook to say a drasha. So Rav Kook said the following. There's a medrash in Eicha, that the Rebbeinu Shalom says like this. Halavai hoyu Yisrael imi, afilu hoyu machisim oisi. You don't have an understanding. Halavai, the Jews should be with me in Eretz Yisrael, even if they would get me angry. So Rav Kook said, you see, Hashem says, even if Jews come to Eretz Yisrael, and even if they're doing Averos, and they're doing Chatoim, and they're getting Hashem angry, Hashem says, Halavai, if only that. Whereupon Rav Itzla Petterberg said, B'mechilas kvoidcha harama, that's not what the Medrash means. The Medrash doesn't mean Hashem says, come and sin. The Medrash means Hashem says, I wish you could come and sin, but the problem is when you come and sin, Eretz Yisrael vomits you out. That's what the Medrash means. The Medrash doesn't mean that. That's what Hashem wants. Hashem is wishing it could be, but the problem is it can't. Because Eretz Yisrael is a very intolerant land. Because it's Taki, the Yoshveha, that those who are not worthy cannot stay on the land. So you have on the one hand, Rav Kook held, Nachnu fashanu marinu, but kulanu b'nei yishecha nachnu. But on the other hand, halavai is halavai. God wishes we could be there, but if we're not deserving, unfortunately, the verdict of history is, and the sad verdict is, that the descendants of the founders of the state not only don't live in Eretz Yisrael, they're not members of our people anymore. Two other thoughts.
Did Moshe say Hallel?
But Moshe did not say Hallel. No. The Moshe did not say Hallel. He said Tachla.
But the fact remains, at the end of the day, I may not agree with a lot of things said here today. It's not important. But I used to live in Miami Beach, and a lot of Pashul Hasidim from New York used to come to their condos there. Among them was a couple with a Beckish and a white beard, and came that day, and he said to the minyan, please, let's say Hallel without bracha. And everybody disagreed. He took off by himself, he went to the vestibule, he davened by himself. At the end of the tefillah, I went to him, and I said, come on, explain to me. Because I was born in Iran and never knew about Hitler. Only when I came to the United States, I saw people with numbers here. So, he, as he was taking off his tefillin, he showed me the numbers. He said, Rabbi Shmuel, if we had the state of Israel, when they were hacking these numbers in my skin here, as a kid, it would not have happened.
Okay.
Now,
the main point, let me just say something.
Are we better off that we have a state of Israel or we are not?
The reality is reality. Yes, of course. But let me just say one thing. To even broach this subject, the rabbim, you got to give me credit. It took some guts, right?
Nobody will talk about it.
But I want to point one thing. Whatever you do, I'm not telling anybody what to do. It's not a matter of feeling, Jews died and we're happy. It's not a matter of being happy, not being happy. It's a matter of halacha that has technical requirements. A person could have great allegiance to the state of Israel. That has nothing to do with saying Hallel. A person could be...
That we should say only good about it, state of Israel.
Yes.
You're presenting it that it's one package.
So again, I am perfectly open to show me inside the psakim of any Paiskei Hadar that say otherwise. I'm completely open to that.
If you have only two who didn't really know, why did the majority say yes?
I'll tell you. Yachiv Ram Halacha Karabim is only if they're Shakal B'Chachma. If the two Gedolei Hadar say no, then...
That's already stretching it a little.
Let's conclude with two things. In this week's Parsha, something from the Parsha, we say at the end, B'chukoisai, the Yibban Shem says, Va'eshbar moitois ulechem. I will break the pegs of your yoke. And I'll lead you upright to Eretz Yisrael. Va'eshbar moitois ulechem. Can I ask you a question? Why in benching do we say something else completely different? We don't say God, right? In Torah, Hashem says, I'm going to break the peg of your yoke. In benching, we say, Harachaman hu yishbar uleinu me'at savarenu. Hashem will break the yoke. So why? The Chumash says God is only going to break the pegs. And in benching, we ask God to break the yoke. Okay? It's a very interesting shot from Machon Maggid Harakiah. He says like this. He says, we're leaving Mitzrayim. God knows the Jewish people are leaving Egypt, they're entering Eretz Yisrael. But He knows that Egypt was only the first of the exiles. Eventually we're going to have to go into many, many exiles. He gives the following mashal. You have a farmer. At the end of the harvest season, he takes the yoke off the animal. Of course, how is the yoke attached to the animal? With the peg. What does he do with the peg at the end of the season? He takes the peg, he tosses it, Next year, he'll get a new peg. And every year at the end of the season, he tosses the peg. But what happens if the farmer says, I had enough of the farming life, I want to liquidate the farm, I'm moving to the big city. He takes the yoke, and he gets rid of the whole yoke. So when we're leaving Mitzrayim, God says, you know what? Right now, I'm removing the peg. I'm removing the Egyptians. Unfortunately, the yoke still has to be there, because you're going to go back into 4 more Goliaths. So the pasuk says, "Va'eshbar moitai solcha." I'm going to break the peg of the yoke. But now, us today, 2,000 years later, whether we're aschalta de gota, wherever we're holding, right? I certainly can't tell you where we're holding. We don't have to go through any more golasim. We ask Yibanu Shalom, forget about the peg. Harachmanu yishbar uleinu. Take the whole yoke and destroy the whole yoke. Okay? One last thing. If you look in the Nevuah of Rachel Imenu, look at number 30. Look at number 30. This is the Navi Yirmiyah, Lamed Aleph Yudalad. Lamed Aleph Yudalad. Koyamar Hashem. So says God. Kayal B'Rama Nishma. I hear a voice on high. Nehi B'chi Samurim. Crying. Double Lashon. Kal B'Rama Nishma A. Nehi B'chi Samurim B. Rachel Mevaka Alboneha. Rachel's crying. 1. Me'analahi Nachem. She won't be consoled. B. 2. Look in the next verse. Koyamar Hashem, so says Hashem, Mini koylech mi bechi, stop crying. Ve'einayich mi dima, stop crying. B. Why? Ki yesh sachel lefulasech, you'll be rewarded. A. V'shavu me'eretz oyev. B. Yesh tikva le'achrisech. A. V'shavu banim legvulam. B. The whole nevuah, Rachel's crying. She can't be consoled. God says, stop crying. You'll be rewarded. They'll return. Says the Noid of Yehuda, and says the Aruch HaShulchan. Rachel, sitting on high, and she sees Klal Yisrael, she's crying about 2 things. The first thing she's crying about is, she sees Jews in America, she sees Jews in England, she sees Jews in Chutz La'aretz. Why are they not in my country? So she's crying for them. But that's what we call a halbatzara. That's half a problem. For that she could be consoled. What she can't be consoled is, she sees her baneha, mavaka al baneha, but they don't look like her baneha anymore. Forget about the fact they're not in Israel. They don't look like Jews. They don't act like Jews. They're empty. They're bereft of mitzvahs. That's the second thing she's crying about. She's crying about the absence of the Jewish people from Eretz Yisrael, but even more, she's crying of the behavior of the Jewish people. So the consolation, Hashem says, Mini koylech mi bechi, stop crying, they're going to return. But he says even more, Yibanu Shalom says, Einayich midima means your children will return, you'll still recognize them as Banim Atem Hashem Lekechem. Yesh Sachar Lefulasech, yes, you'll be rewarded, they'll return. V'shavu me'eretz oyev. But Rachel is looking for more than just V'shavu me'eretz oyev. She's looking for V'shavu Banim Legvulam, that they should return and look like Banim Lamakam. So Rabbi Isai, whatever your personal practice is, certainly, even though we're very grateful to have Eretz Yisrael, we're still awaiting the Nevuah of Rachel, V'shavu Banim L'Kulam. I appreciate your patience and your understanding. Have a wonderful day.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.